Hi guys, welcome back to another cook along with me, Ben, here at Inoxtine. I hope you enjoyed last week's macaroni cauliflower cheese. This week we are going to be cooking a roasted butternut squash and sage risotto. Similar to last week, in your cookery packs you will get a recipe card that tells you what ingredients you have and what equipment you have in there. Just before we start the session today, make sure that you have everything in your packs that is on this recipe card, just because it'll make your lives easier, that being equipment and the ingredients. I have all my ingredients weighed out here ready for this cookery class, so I'm just going to jump straight in and we're going to prep our butternut squash first so we can get that on roasting. So all I'm doing here is I'm going to top and tail the butternut squash, keeping that clawed hand like we did from last week. I'm just going to get rid of that. Once we got to that stage, we're just going to chop it straight in half just to make the butternut squash a little bit more manageable. We'll do one half at a time. We'll do the easy half, and all we're going to do here is just get as close to the actual flesh of the butternut squash, going round the butternut squash. You can do this with a peeler, it's just easier to do like this with the knife. Chopping off all of that skin. Once we've got those two bits like that, we're just going to slice these into sections and we're going to dice it up nice and evenly. So one nice slice through the butternut squash, creating those segments. Get rid of the top and the bottom layer just so you can get them all stacked nicely. I'll dice this up. Half this butternut squash is going to be used for the garnish on the risotto at the end, and the other half is going to be used for the puree. Right, this bottom bit generally has the seeds in, so we're just going to chop it into sections. We're just going to get a spoon. We're going to scoop out all of those seeds into a bin. You don't need those. What you can do actually, if you want to, you can save those seeds and you can roast them later on in the oven. You could use that as a garnish on this as well, but we've actually got some pumpkin seeds anyway, so we're going to use nice fresh ones on our dish. Scooping out all those seeds. And just chopping that last bit into nice chunks. Try and get them as evenly as you possibly can, just because it'll look nicer for presentation in your risotto later if you're trying to impress anyone. Last bit. Obviously take your time, there's no rush, you don't want to cut yourself. Knives are very dangerous. Once we've got to that stage, just give it all a break up and you've got all your chunks nice sized. We're going to chop half our sage leaves, just roughly chop them. And we're just going to pop them over our butternut squash to get that flavour out of the sage into the butternut squash. Just pop that in there. And all we're going to do here is we're going to give this a drizzle of oil, nice generous drizzle. A nice pinch of salt as well. Give it a toss up, and that's just going to go in the oven at 200 degrees for about 10 to 15 minutes. Next step guys, we're going to chop our onion. All that's going to do, straight in half. we're going to top it. So we're going to take the stem end off. We're going to keep the furry root bit on, just because it'll be easier and it'll hopefully stop you from crying. So what we're going to do now is just peel the onion. Both onions are chopped, peeled even. So starting off with this half first, the best way is to obviously claw your fingers, so you're minimising the risk of cutting yourselves. And all we're going to do is we're going to slice into the onion at a diagonal angle. We're going to slice through, but not quite all the way through the onion, and we're just going to get as close to each slice as we possibly can, because this will obviously make the onions nice and fine, and that's exactly what we want when it goes into a risotto. So once you've sliced both onions, we're going to then slice it lengthways, so to the root. We're just going to slice all the way through this time, both onions. Once you got to that stage, all we're going to do now is we're going to slowly do the seesaw motion, so keeping your fingers nice into that claw. We're just going to slice into the onions to get that nice fine product at the end. Once you're at that stage, just to get those onions a little bit more fine, we're just going to run the knife through them nice and slowly. Take your time here, just rest your tops of your fingers on top of the knife, and running that through there to get a nice fine onion. Once your onions are nice and fine, all we're going to do now is we're going to pop them back into the pot. So for the garlic, all we're going to do here is we're going to get the flat handle of the knife, and all we're just going to do is a nice one firm push down so you hear a nice crack. Once you hear the crack, all we're going to do is we're going to peel that garlic, taking that skin off. So once the garlic is nice and peeled, all we're going to do is we're going to use the fine side of the grater. We're just going to grate that garlic into a nice paste. We're going to pop that into our onion pot later for when we come on to making the base of our risotto. Just getting the hand up there. Once you've got to that stage, scoop it all up. Just going to run the knife through it quickly. Get it any big bits that didn't grate too well. You don't want any big lumpy bits of garlic in your risotto. What you want to be able to taste is the rice and the butternut squash. So once it's nice and fine and in a puree form, I'm just going to pop that into our onion pot. Right guys, so once we've got the onions chopped and the garlic grated and pureed down, we're just going to warm our pan up nice and slowly so it comes up to a nice heat. Just a nice splash of oil in there. We're just going to sweat our onions and garlic down until they go to like transparent and see-through in colour. At which point, then we will then add our arborio rice. So, right, onions go in. Just sweating them off. Careful not to burn the onions. We don't want to get any colour on these onions at all. We want to keep it as plain as we can. Once it's sweated down and it's see-through and transparent in colour, we're just going to throw in that arborio rice. We're going to throw it in and give it a nice mix up until we start hearing a snapping pop. Once we're at that stage guys, we're just going to add our white wine. We're going to let that reduce now for about 2 minutes or so, just until the liquid's more or less gone. So at this stage guys, once the wine is reducing, we're just going to grab our stock. And we're probably going to, once that wine's reduced or more or less evaporated off, we're going to add half of our stock and probably leave that until that's reduced in a similar way that the wine has, just so that we're getting that rice cooked off. So my wine is pretty much all reduced off now, so I'm just going to add in half the stock and turn it down to a low temperature so that that rice cooks off nicely. Just give that a mix round, all that rice on the sides gets in that water. So all I'm going to do is bring that up to a boil and turn it down to a simmer for about 10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes roughly, until that liquid is reduced off, and then I'll add the remaining of the stock later on. In the meantime, with that's cooking, I'm just going to mash our butternut squash that was roasted in the oven. So I'm just going to get on with that now. Just going to take out half of the butternut squash that we're going to use later on as garnish on in our dish. Just going to mash up that butternut squash there, what's left of half, and I'm just going to make that into a puree so it will colour our risotto later on. So once you're at this stage here, where the liquid is more or less reduced off, we're just going to add our final measure of stock and just cook the remainder of that rice out. So I'll just let that reduce down now. It took about 5 or 10 minutes to reduce the first half down, so probably wait another 5 to 10 minutes. Right, so now we're at our final stage of the risotto coming down nicely. We've got quite thick, not much moisture in the pan anymore. So at this point, we're going to turn the heat up a little bit and we're going to finish our risotto off. So first off, we're just going to add all our puree in there. Once all that's incorporated and mixed in, we're just going to add in our butternut squash chunks. Just give them a mix through. Careful not to break them chunks up, you want them nice and chunky through the risotto. So be careful with that spoon. Just going to warm them up nicely. Next we're just going to add our butter, nice chopped chunks of butter, just throw that dotted around the risotto, and half of our parmesan cheese, sprinkle that in, a nice pinch of salt in there. Don't go too heavy on the salt because parmesan is quite salty anyway, so you can obviously season that later. To your preference, so just mixing that butter, parmesan through the risotto. So once that's fully melted through and all the butter and the cheese is through there, I'm just going to turn that off. And now we're going to move on to our plating. So guys, now the risotto is nicely cooked, so we're just going to give it a quick taste test to make sure it's tasting good with the seasoning. That's spot on for me. I'm just going to add a pinch more salt, I think. Now we're just going to plate it up nicely. So this recipe will do at least 2 of you. So if you are cooking for yourself, you can freeze it, or you can cook for you and someone else. So all I'm going to do, nice scoop, big scoops in the bowl, get it all nice and central. I'm just going to top it, get some of them big chunks in there. Right around the bowl, flatten around. I'm just going to top it with some of the leftover sage leaves that I had. I've also got a couple of roasted pumpkin seeds here as well, and then finally our parmesan with a splash of truffle oil. So first, starting off, I'm just going to dot some of these sage leaves on the risotto. A couple of pumpkin seeds. And then finishing it off with a bit of parmesan. And then finally a nice drizzle of truffle oil around the edge of the risotto. Just adding an extra flavour in there. And that is your roasted butternut squash and sage risotto. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I hope you can take some valuable lessons away from this session, and I'll very much look forward to seeing you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in, guys.